Carlos Sainz. He's an idiot, right? He showed that in Hungary when he drove into race leader Oscar Piastri while being lapped. But the criticism is largely wrong. Maybe not for that incident, but his whole season has been hugely impressive, to the point where I would argue he is being completely wasted at Williams, down in 15th in the championship. He's performing at a very high level, and I can prove it. Now, the evidence comes from everything else, pretty much, that Sainz has done over the course of the season. I'm very fortunate to be able to follow every driver in Formula One in extraordinary detail through my work covering it for the race. I speak to the drivers, speak to engineers, I watch trackside, I watch onboard, study the data, use every possible bit of information I can to understand what people are doing. Now, that all goes into my driver rankings after every Grand Prix weekend. And this is going to surprise you. On average, Carlos Sainz is the 5th best ranked driver over the year. And I can say I got a bit of stick on social media for that. That's the big picture, but let's break it down into examples that you will have missed if you've been following Formula One as a fan, because Carlos Sainz doesn't get a great deal of airtime. So let's forget about the Piastri-Hungary incident for a moment. That was stupid driving, certainly, but the rest of what Sainz has done has largely been enormously impressive. And there are probably 3 key areas that I would like to zero in on to justify this. The first is qualifying performance. Now, he's been the faster Williams driver most of the season. He's only been out-qualified by his teammate twice, and the only other one was Australia, where Sainz couldn't even run in qualifying. He's regularly made what's a Q1 car a car that makes Q2. Now, you're not going to get many headlines when you get into Q2 and that's effectively your qualifying on pole position, but when you're in the 9th best car, and in fact it became the 10th best car in Hungary thanks to Aston Martin's upgrade, that is delivering what you can, and if you put it into a front-running car, he is qualifying well. The second is race performances. He is absolutely backing up that qualifying pace with what he's doing in the race. There have been a number of occasions where he's finished ahead of potentially quicker cars. Probably the standout one is the Chinese Grand Prix. Remember, Franco Colapinto was having a good weekend there. He was delayed and he was coming back through and trying to get 9th place off Sainz in the closing stages. But Sainz just managed to keep the quicker Alpine at arm's length, and he took 2 points out of a race that for most drivers probably would have yielded none, and he's done this on multiple occasions this year. The trouble is, sometimes he'll have a really strong first lap, he'll be up on the periphery of the points and slide backwards, but when you're in the 9th or 10th fastest car, that is what happens. There is nothing he can do about that. Point 3 is he's just battering Alex Albon. Now, I've seen lots of people writing Alex Albon off, but Albon is no mug. He's led the line for Williams for a long time. He had a very strong season last year, even before Sainz started to get on top of him in the latter part of the year. But by and large, he is quicker than Albon. The couple of times he's been beaten by Albon in qualifying, it's been by a matter of thousandths of a second. So Albon's ceiling is basically Sainz's normal level of performance, and he can go higher. I would contend if you transplant this level of performance into a front-running car, you would be talking about Carlos Sainz a lot more. There would have been pole positions and there would have been wins in the right car. That's the big problem. So those 3 key areas are where he's excelling, and this is going to sound bizarre, but I would contend that this makes 2026 one of his best, if not the best, of Sainz's 12 seasons in Formula One. We've talked about what he's doing well, but the why is crucial in understanding how he's been so good, and also why that Hungary incident with Piastri is actually a symptom of the very mechanism and mindset that has made him so good. So how is Sainz able to do this? He's certainly frustrated by the plight of Williams, massively so, because he was expecting a step forward, just like everybody else was. Last year was great, leading the midfield, they should have kicked on, but it's been a disaster. The car was late, it's overweight, it's still overweight, and whatever they do with upgrades, it's going to be a difficult second half of the season. Now, plenty of drivers in his position would let that frustration get to them, and it would show in their performance. He's been at the front. He's not a driver on the way up anymore. He is somebody trying to get back to the front. He has won Grand Prix. He has been a Ferrari driver. So Sainz finds himself in this really, really difficult position, but he has very consciously worked to avoid falling into that negative mindset and aimed to extract everything he possibly can from a terrible car, because he knows that his stock will plummet when he's languishing in F1's midfield if he doesn't do that. It looks like he's going to be at Williams again next year, but he knows what he's doing now will play into the equation if he's looking for another drive in the future. He wants to be first on the call list if you're a big team and you want a new driver because somebody has left. Max Verstappen at Red Bull. If there's a place at Ferrari, could he go back there? If there's a place at McLaren, return there. If there's an opportunity to go in at Mercedes, that's what he'll be thinking of. Now, loads of drivers do get demotivated in this position. One great example, actually, Michael Schumacher admitted in 2005 with Ferrari that he didn't feel he was at his absolute best, getting that last 10th because Ferrari was struggling so much. He admitted that after that season. Now, I wouldn't blame Sainz for getting into that mindset, but also it's a career-destroying mindset. So Sainz is making sure he is fighting for everything. And that brings us back to something Piastri said after the incident in Hungary. Piastri was justifiably furious, and he complained about Sainz siding with Alonso for what he called last place. It wasn't technically last place, but it might as well have been, given they were fighting for a bag of nothing. But he said he was fighting for it like it's the World Championship, and obviously then drove into me, who was actually fighting for something meaningful at the front. So this has been Sainz's season. He is fighting for everything, even when it's nothing, in a car that cannot be at the front. And that has allowed him to perform at this very, very high level. And this is why he is so spectacularly wasted at Williams. And he knows it. Now, he's doing everything he can to get Williams to climb the grid. He's not stinting. He's not spending his time agitating in the driver market. In fact, he said publicly that he's not worried about that before the August break. He's leaving that to his team in the background, and his managerial team is working very, very hard on that. Now, unless there's some massive bombshell in the driver market, his hopes of jumping back into a front-running car aren't going to be fulfilled in 2027. So all he can do now is work as hard as he can to help Williams climb the grid. And he doesn't seem entirely convinced by what he's seeing behind the scenes. We got into the detail on that in this video, where we run through the reasons why he is a little bit concerned. But the key question is, are Williams making the necessary changes? If Williams is not a team that is on that upward trajectory, that is not capable of doing that, it's not just Sainz's performances that are being wasted at Williams, it's all those peripheral benefits that James Vowles, the team principal, has talked about Sainz's experience, his technical ability, etc., etc. And this is the key thing. If you're Carlos Sainz and your ability is being wasted and your off-track contribution is being wasted, you are going to be looking elsewhere. But if you can't, you have got to do the job. And it'll be doubly frustrating for Sainz because he's really adapted well to the 2026 Formula One cars. For such a cerebral driver, he's mentioned that is down to actually being able to drive on instinct. That might sound counterintuitive, but his approach is do all the work out of the car, so when you're in the car, you can just be in the zone and deliver. And my word, hasn't he done that well? So you've got one of the drivers who is best adapting to the challenges of the 2026 cars as well, doing it in service of fighting for the odd 12th place on a good day. And that really, really isn't good enough. Now, what Carlos Sainz did in Hungary was a big mistake. But it's a consequence of this mindset. That doesn't justify it. That doesn't mean it's okay. But sometimes you have these wires crossed. I mentioned Michael Schumacher earlier, and there were times when his ruthless drive and will to win caused problems, notably those collisions with Damon Hill at Adelaide in 94 and Jacques Villeneuve at Jerez in 97. When the World Championship was at stake, you cannot separate the good from the bad when it comes to the consequences of this approach. But what is very, very clear, as I've argued throughout this video, 99.5% of what Sainz has done this season has been outstandingly good. And just because it was only that incident in Hungary that has caught the attention doesn't mean his season boils down to that. He is being ruthlessly determined to drive at the best possible level. He is being selfish. And that means that if once in a while you trip over a leader, it's not ideal, but it's what happens, because in Formula One, nobody else fights for you. You have to justify every time you get in the car that you are worthy of a place, not just on the grid, but at the front. That is what Sainz is doing. And the fact that he's fighting for 15th rather than P1 hasn't changed that. That is to his enormous credit and has allowed him to be one of the standout drivers of 2026. But have I convinced you? Let me know in the comments what you make of Sainz this season, whether you think he really has performed at this level or you just think he's a has-been dreaming of a world that will never exist when he's back at the front in Formula One. I want to know if you've had a close look at what he's been doing throughout the season, not just in Hungary, and changed your mind.